The capital's railway station, the main gates of the city. The long-distance trains and commuter trains arrive here. People travel to Kyiv and away for business or visits, for studies or work. Kyiv is visited by thousands of people every day. The Kyiv Metro is ready to receive guests. It holds a crowd of passengers every few minutes. It delivers them to different directions in the city through underground lines. It's fast, comfortable and cheap. The nearest metro station is located on site at Vokzalna Square. The entrance is traditionally marked by the capital letter M. Vokzalna is one of the busiest stations of the Kyiv underground system today. It was unveiled as a priority station in the first wave of construction of the capital's metro system on 6 November 1960. The station is 42 meters deep. It is regarded as a deep-level pylon-type station. It's an architectural monument. The two-story ground concourse is conjoined to the building of the Kyiv passenger suburban train station. In future, Vokzalna may well become part of a mass transit station. According to the design project, it will connect the Svetoshinska-Brovarska Red Line with the new Podil-Vigurievskaya line that will be built. The rhythm is the first word that comes to mind when looking at passenger crowds entering the metro. The overcrowded platforms become empty. The rail cars led the crowds in regardless of the amount of people. And then even at the normally overloaded Vokzalna station appear windows, during which one can calmly observe the details of the station's interior. Lots of authors who took part in a special contest wanted to make it into a sort of a symbolic gate into the city, or rather the gate to the Ukrainian Socialist Soviet Republic, since Kyiv was the capital. Therefore, the theme of appearance had to be associated with this idea. In other words, at different times they wanted to place a map of Ukraine at the rear of the station building, something associated with Bogdan Khmelnytsky, maybe the board. Of course, the medallions in the main hall of the station are regarded to be its key decoration. They are about 2 meters in diameter and are submerged into the pylons. The thematic relief compositions are made from aluminum and anodized by bronze. The author of these 8 masterpieces is muralist Alexander Mizin, who minted important milestones in the history of Ukraine onto the medallions. Various events are depicted on these medallions: the Pereyaslav Council, Villagers' Uprising, October Revolution, Great Patriotic War, Fellowship of Nations. Some of these medallions are easy to read. In particular, the mural Friendship of Nations illustrates several women in the national costumes of various republics, and at the top of it, the word friendship is inscribed on a wreath. However, the vast majority of passengers pass them by without paying much attention. They don't have time to investigate these historic artifacts. On the other hand, they are not visiting a museum. Trains, especially in the rush hour, have a precise schedule, one after another. So there's no time for yawning here. People with backpacks, boxes, suitcases, carts and bags, everyone is heading to the escalator. Besides, just as one group of people is leaving, another enters the underground. Notice how the traffic complies with some kind of single unseen schedule, which stands behind the precise and well-functioning work of metro staff like a Swiss watch. Why don't the cars seem too overcrowded even during the rush hour in summer? Although according to statistics, the number of passengers does not depend on the season. It's down to the notion that we are wearing light clothing, and visually it seems that there are fewer people. By contrast, when people are dressed in big coats, there is less space in the train cars. However, how is the average number of passengers that go through actually counted? They are not counted by the number of tokens received at the turnstiles or counted by the video cameras. Special scales are adjusted on metro stations that weigh the total weight inside the cars. They divide this figure by the average weight of a person. So in winter, about 170 passengers can enter a train car, and about 200 in summer.
Раньше вагоны были покрыты, например, вот стены вагона линкруст.
Back then, the cars were covered with lincrusta inside. If you remember, the trains had relief walls inside. They've been changed for plastic, more modern material. Of course, back then there was an incandescent lamp, which was swapped for LED-based lighting. Of course, the cars are fully refitted every 3 years. Everything is changed, from the seating, linoleum, plastic to every small detail, everything that the passengers can see.
Линолеум, пластик и все остальное, то есть, что видит пассажир.
The first cars used in the Kyiv Metro system were comfortable, with large windows, soft couches, and the floor was fitted with linoleum. It was 19 meters long and 2.7 meters wide. They were intended for 240 passengers and had 3 types of brakes: electric, mechanical, and air brakes. Also, they could accelerate up to 75 kilometers per hour. Seven trains consisting of 3 cars served the line from Dnipro to Vokzalna for some time, from the time that the Kyiv Underground was unveiled, and 1 more train was held in reserve. The line was 5.23 kilometers long. About 12 kilometers of tunnels were built for setting in motion the first phase of the capital's subway system. About 660,000 cubic meters of soil were dug from the ground. Around 350,000 cars would have been needed to remove all the soil from the building sites. And the main thing was people with fiery eyes and wild enthusiasm, those who gave our city the underground system.
Скільки ж їх трудилося в тунелях?
How many people worked in tunnels? 1,000. 5 or 10? Many more. The whole country worked there. Yes, you heard it right, the whole country. Moscow shared their experience with Ukrainians. Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia gave their cables. Leningrad escalators.
Ленінград.
The Ural electric equipment. There were workers from 300 enterprises strewn right across the country. Thank you, friends, on behalf of all the citizens of Kyiv. The cars were provided by Mytishchi, which is near Moscow. They are way better than a street car. The long-awaited day has arrived. Tens of thousands of passengers passed through the underground routes.
Підземними магістралями.
Every working person in the country wants to visit the Kyiv Underground. Welcome, friends! Let's start with Vokzalna station, as it is the gate to the city. We buy our first ticket. Let's see the first metro line as it goes from the railway station to Dnipro station. Let's smile happily and get onto the escalator.
І на ескалатор.
It is so nice, isn't it? The first metro stations were strange for passengers. They were like underground castles, with all this formality and richness of design. Pylons in white marble, their feathered borders remind one of Kyiv's ancient domes. Slabs of granite of black and light gray colors are laid out in a chessboard pattern. Ceiling lights with 28 fluorescent lamps each, a luxury and more. But criticism could still be heard.
В архиве мне удалось найти стенограмму заседания архитекторов Киева, которые обсуждали.
I was able to find a stenograph in the archive of a sitting in which the architecture in Kyiv's underground stations was discussed, both old and new.
Очередь открыта и
So it was 1961. The first phase is open, and famous architects are discussing the look of the stations. Their opinion is very different from current ones.
их мнение очень отличается. Например, вестибюль станции.
For instance, the entrance hall of Hryshchatyk station is covered inside with a multicolored abaculus, and architects called it the Tashkent or Uzbek bathrobe. It was inappropriate for the principles of Ukrainian architecture. Vokzalna was criticized and compared to some types of caves. It was far from beautiful when guests enter the first underground station and see this horror.
Пещеры. Это очень некрасиво, когда гости города спускаются на первую станцию метро и видят этот ужас.
Architectural tastes are a specific issue, and it's a thankless task to argue about it. Vokzalna station may seem a grey and depressing station for some, with its endless stream of passengers. However, as soon as the hall becomes empty, it reveals its beauty in full, in all of its greatness. These stations found themselves in a difficult era, when old neoclassical projects still continued to be developed. But at that time, in 1955, 5 years before the metro was opened, the fight against architectural excesses began. Therefore, many of these projects were discarded, shortened, or simply replaced with something simpler. These stations are far from what they were supposed to be, though they're different from those that had already been built in a strictly functional style. The first sketches of Kyiv Metro stations dating back to the beginning of the 1950s can be found only in photos. Initially, there were many. Something is irreparably lost. However, even when looking at the scant copies of these sketches, one can imagine the colossal ideas of the authors. Pomposity? Maybe. But how beautiful! For instance, this semicircular rotunda of a station's entrance hall. The plan was to have a statue of a young Ukrainian woman with bread and salt, on the tower a spire with a star, which were traditional for that period. Talking of women and style, you may have noticed that the Kyiv Underground does not have female drivers. Although this is not prohibited, it is more common for men to work as drivers. On the other hand, the platform staff on duty at stations are predominantly women, but the rules are strict here. The uniform, combed back hair, no rings or similar items to be worn on the hands, no bracelets, watches or rings. This is due to safety issues and not because of style requirements. Few people remember that in the beginning there were kiosks in the entrance hall at Vokzalna station. Traditionally, there was one selling newspapers and another selling souvenirs and perfume. People say that the scent here did not remind one of a railway station. At the beginning of summer, everything here smelled like strawberries. Baskets and carts on the railway station forecourt were filled with fragrant berries. All of this was delivered right to platforms before the departure of a train. Leaving Kyiv without strawberries at this time was a true crime. This tradition was associated later on with the famous Kyiv cake, but that is a completely different story. The doors are closing. Next station is